The House will be in order. The prayer will be offered today by our chaplain, Father Coughlin.
Cherry blossoms draw thousands of visitors to the capital city, Lord. Their silent beauty causes busy residents to stop frenzied motion and simply gaze for a moment. Reflected in pools or clustered together on lawns, wrinkled with age, their new life displays a unified motion of gentle friendship. Today in our prayer, Lord, we offer voice to their song of spring and praise you and bless you for this momentary revelation of your unique mystery and the blessing upon this nation. Lord, this powerful gift of the Japanese people invites us to pray for our friends in their hour of need and suffering. Spring's fragile beauty will not be manipulated or contained for very long. In and through its passing glimpse of glory, the truth of your promise is revealed. So we learn the importance of your timing and the art of subtle cohesion to natural forces. Lord, grant us patience that you will have your way with us now and always. Amen.
Amen. The Chair has examined the journal of the last day's proceedings and announces to the House his approval thereof. And pursuant to Clause 1 of Rule 1, the journal stands approved. The Pledge of Allegiance today will be led by the gentleman from Texas, Mr. Burgess.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
The Chair will entertain requests for 1-minute speeches. For what purpose does the gentleman from South Carolina rise?
Mr. Speaker, I ask permission to address the House for 1 minute, revise and extend my remarks.
Without objection.
Mr. Speaker, all Americans have provided sympathy for the people of Japan due to the massive earthquake and tsunami. But I was grateful to learn last week at the Lexington Rotary Club, led by President Nick Pizzuti, that the Rotary Foundation is taking direct action. Special Assistant Bill Walker of the 2nd District Office is a dedicated Lexington Rotarian. The Rotary Japan and Pacific Islands Disaster Fund has been established for donations online worldwide. Rotary International President Ray Klingon-Smith of Kirksville, Missouri, is promoting the people-to-people assistance in the best tradition of Rotary with his creed, building communities, bridging continents. Japan is a leading Rotary nation, and it is fitting the incoming RI President nominee to continue the relief assistance is Suzuki Tanaka of the Rotary Club of Yashio, Saitama, Japan. As a Rotarian, I appreciate Rotarians worldwide with hundreds of new clubs in formerly communist countries from Bulgaria to Russia who are making a difference with service above self. As with Polio Plus, Rotarians can achieve humanitarian assistance which creates worldwide records for effectiveness. In conclusion, God bless our troops, and we will never forget September 11th and the global war on terrorism.
Time has expired. The Chair lays before the House a communication.
The Honorable, the Speaker, House of Representatives, sir. Pursuant to the permission granted in Clause 2H of Rule 2 of the Rules of the U.S. House of Representatives, the clerk received the following message from the Secretary of the Senate on March 17, 2011 at 6:52 p.m. that the Senate agreed to House Concurrent Resolution 30. With best wishes, I am, signed sincerely, Robert F. Reeves, Deputy Clerk.
The Chair lays before the House a communication.
The Honorable, the Speaker, House of Representatives, sir. Pursuant to Clause 5A.4a of Rule 10 of the Rules of the House of Representatives, I designate the following members to be available to serve on investigative subcommittees of the Committee on Ethics during the 112th Congress. Zoe Lofgren of California, Ben Chandler of Kentucky, J.P. Sarbanes of Maryland, Terry A. Sewell of Alabama, Paul Tonko of New York, Ben Ray Lujan of New Mexico, David N. Cicilline of Rhode Island, William R. Keating of Massachusetts, Adam B. Schiff of California, Yvette D. Clarke of New York. Best regards, Nancy Pelosi, Democratic Leader.
For what purpose does the gentleman from Kentucky rise?
With permission to address the House for 1 minute.
Gentleman is recognized for 1 minute.
Mr. Speaker, in Louisville we have a lot to be proud of. The Derby, the Louisville Slugger, Muhammad Ali, and now the NCAA Division II men's basketball champion Bellarmine Knights. Led by Coach Scotty Davenport, the Knights finished their regular season with 24 wins, won their second consecutive conference title, and stormed through the NCAA tournament to bring home the university's first national championship. The Knights corralled Mustangs and tamed Mavericks, and on Saturday, led by all-tourney players Jeremy Kindle and Justin Benedetti, Chris Dowse 16 points, Luke Spriggs double-double, and clutch free throws from Hobbs and Helms, the Knights grounded a jet and sent the Seasiders packing. The Knights are true student-athletes who overcame injuries and adversity bound together by trust in their abilities and trust in each other. And let's not forget the trust and support of the fans who traveled by the busload nearly 900 miles to cheer on their Knights. Mr. Speaker, I ask you join me today in congratulating Coach Davenport, the team, and the entire Bellarmine community on its 2011 NCAA National Championship. This was a victory that made history, and on behalf of everyone in Louisville, we're proud to call the Knights our hometown heroes and national champions. I yield back.
The gentleman's time has expired. For what purpose does the gentleman from Texas rise?
Ask permission to rise, address the House for 1 minute, revise and extend my remarks.
The gentleman is recognized for 1 minute.
And I thank the Speaker for the recognition. Mr. Speaker, last night the President took to the airwaves and talked to the nation about the international efforts that America is leading in Libya. This comes almost 2 weeks after the President gave his approval for the United States to be involved in the action in Libya. The President discussed the United States' interest in the conflict, the limited involvement of the United States military, and the role of other countries. What the President failed to deliver was a clear articulation on what is America's role in this conflict. Putting our men and women in harm's way while not knowing the specifics of how and why is not just unacceptable, it is dangerous. Mr. President, you need to be more forthcoming. The American people need more information. The American people certainly deserve answers. The explanation last night was disappointing, and we find ourselves even more frustrated as specific information was not provided. What is the exit strategy? What is the end game? What are our goals? How are we going to ensure that the next government of Libya is not even more hostile than the current regime? The President does need to follow through with his actions. We need to have the resolve to see this through. The President waited too long to address the nation. Certainly the Congress needed to be involved, and certainly the American people needed to be involved. I yield back.
The gentleman's time has expired. Pursuant to Clause 8 of Rule 20, the Chair will postpone further proceedings today on motions to suspend the rules on which a recorded vote for the yeas and nays are ordered, or on which a vote incurs objection under Clause 6, Rule 20. Record votes on postponed questions will be taken after 6:30 today. For what purpose does the gentleman from Wisconsin seek recognition?
Mr. Speaker, I move to suspend the rules and pass H.R. 1079.
The clerk will report the title of the bill.
H.R. 1079, a bill to amend the Internal Revenue Code of 1986 to extend the funding and expenditure authority of the Airport and Airway Trust Fund, to amend Title 49 United States Code to extend the Airport Improvement Program, and for other purposes.
Pursuant to the rule, the gentleman from Wisconsin, Mr. Petri, and the gentleman from Massachusetts, Mr. Capiano, will each control 20 minutes. The Chair recognizes the gentleman from Wisconsin.
Speaker, I ask unanimous consent that all members have 5 legislative days in which to revise and extend their remarks, include extraneous material on Bill 1079.
Without objection.
I ask unanimous consent to include in the congressional record the exchange of letters between the Committee on Ways and Means and the Committee on Transportation and Infrastructure concerning H.R. 1079.
Without objection, so ordered.
Mr. Speaker, I yield such time as he may consume to the principal author of the bill and the chairman of the Transportation Committee, our colleague from the state of Florida, John Mica.
The gentleman from Florida is recognized.
Well, thank you so much, Mr. Speaker and my colleagues. And this is an extension of the what would be known as the aviation bill. I come before the House asking for one extension under the leadership of the new majority in Congress. I also come to the floor after, and let me explain the history of how we got here today with 17 extensions. In 2001, I had the honor and privilege of being named the chair of the Aviation Subcommittee, not knowing what the future would hold. Of course, all of our lives changed on September 11th, 2001, and mine did too. In 2003, we passed a 4-year authorization. The federal government must provide authorization and set the policy for operation of our nation's aviation system, and for the FAA, which is the primary and lead agency. The bill that we passed in 2003 sets forth the policy, the funding, all the projects and everything eligible for federal participation, authorizes all the programs. We did that again in 2003. We did a 4-year bill. 2007, the bill that I helped author, that we brought before the Congress, again after the fateful days of 2001 and the tragedy and again the difficulty the aviation industry saw from 2001 to 2003. But that bill that expired in 2007, the 4-year bill, was extended some 17 times. That's shameful and irresponsible that we find ourselves in a situation where we haven't passed policy. Now, why is this important? Most of the emphasis should be in this Congress on getting people back to work. If we have people working, most of our problems are solved. The states will have revenue, the federal government would have revenue. But it's absolutely amazing when you have the aviation industry that accounts for 9.2% of our gross domestic product and activity in the United States, 9.2%, that the federal government does not have in place, the Congress did not have in place a long-term policy and blueprint which is set forth in that authorization legislation. So 17 times we've come to the floor and there have been these short-term extensions of the bill that we passed originally in 2003 that had expired in 2004. That's the situation we find ourselves in now. Several weeks ago we did pass in the Transportation and Infrastructure Committee a long-term 4-year bill. The Senate has acted, the other body, and they've passed a bill. If it was just our committee, we probably could have had the bill up a little bit quicker, but we do rely on several other committees to add input into this process. We have the Science, Space, and Technology Committee, who just before we left last week completed their portion of the bill. We have the Ways and Means Committee, which also has part of the financial responsibility, the Ways and Means responsibility in the legislation for the extension, and they finished their work. We do need a little bit more time to come to conference, and I pledge an open conference. In the past, legislation has been decided behind closed doors. I hope this to be an open process. This extension will run us through May 31st, I believe, of of this year, the end of May. It is my hope that the first bill that we can get done will be done with this one extension for, again, authorizing all of our aviation programs for the nation. So that's the situation we find ourselves in. We need to pass this legislation because the current 17th extension expires at the end of this week, and we must have this in place to make certain that we can even function in any manner, even though we don't have all the details of new legislation in place, which I pledged to do in the next 60 days. So with that explanation, I'd like to yield back and thank the chairman of the Aviation Subcommittee, the gentleman and our leader on aviation issues, to Mr. Petri.
The gentleman yields back. The gentleman from Wisconsin reserves. The gentleman from Massachusetts is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise in support of H.R. 1079, the Airport and Airway Extension Act of 2011. As you heard, this is the 18th short-term extension for the FAA programs, with enactment of the long-term FAA reauthorization in sight, as the chairman has just mentioned, and we all will look forward to that. I want to echo my colleagues' hopes that this will be the last short-term extension. I know if we have to have one, we'll probably do one, but we all hope that it's the last one we do. Without enactment of this bill, the FAA's Funding and Programs and Expenditures Authority would lapse on March 31st. This clean and straightforward extension will keep the FAA operating at current funding levels for another 2 months through May 31st. It will give Congress time to work out the long-term reauthorization. But I want to be clear. While I support this short-term extension bill, I have serious concerns about H.R. 658, the long-term FAA reauthorization bill that I expect that the House may try to take up this week. In fiscal year 2010, the FAA's major programs were funded at approximately $16 billion. H.R. 658, the FAA Reauthorization and Reform Act of 2011, is a 4-year reauthorization that would reduce the FAA's annual funding to approximately 2008 appropriation levels, $14.9 billion, for the remainder of 2011, and then each year through fiscal year 2014. H.R. 658 would effectively cut roughly $1 billion annually and almost $4 billion total below current funding levels for FAA's budget over the next 4 years. These proposed cuts will have dire consequences on our nation's infrastructure, jobs, and the economy. Mr. Speaker, in February, the House Aviation Subcommittee held a hearing for industry stakeholders to testify about FAA reauthorization. In response to a question that I posed, witnesses representing the aerospace industry, general aviation manufacturers, general aviation pilots, airports, air traffic controllers, and FAA managers all testified that Congress could not cut $1 billion annually from the FAA's budget without harming safety-sensitive programs or hampering the industry. At the same hearing, Ms. Marion Blakely, the FAA administrator under President George W. Bush, stated that, and this is a quote, "The prospect is really devastating to jobs and to our future. Every $1 billion of federal investment in infrastructure creates or sustains approximately 35,000 jobs. Yet H.R. 658 would cut the airport improvement grants for runway construction and safety enhancements by almost $2 billion. Cuts to airport improvement grants alone would cost the nation 70,000 jobs. So let's be clear about one thing. The FAA reauthorization bill that we will consider later this week will not create jobs. It will destroy them. Although much work is ahead of us, I'm optimistic that Congress will be able to enact a long-term bill, and we will not be considering a 19th short-term extension this summer. For the President, however, this particular extension, this bill before us today, I support, and I urge my colleagues to support it. And I
gentleman from Massachusetts reserves. Gentleman from Wisconsin is recognized.
Yes, I would just like to observe to my colleague, we'll have plenty of opportunity to defend and debate the overall reauthorization later this week. The reauthorization bill is broadly supported by the industry affected. We may differ on some portions of it, but one of the major features of the reauthorization is to put in place a strengthened framework and benchmarks for next gen. And as that new technology is deployed, almost every expert we've ever had testifying before committee said it will markedly increase the efficiency and safety of the aviation industry and reduce fuel use by some 25%, helping the environment and our import situation as well. In any event, I would like to mention that the current reauthorization extension, the short-term extension before us, has bipartisan support. I would urge my colleagues in both parties to support it, and I reserve the balance of my time.
Gentleman reserves. Gentleman from Massachusetts.
We have no other speakers, and I yield back the balance of my time.
Gentleman yields back.
I have no further requests for and yield back the balance of my time.
Both sides yield back. The question is, will the House suspend the rules and pass H.R. 1079? Those in favor say aye. Those opposed, no. In the opinion of the Chair, two-thirds being in the affirmative, the rules are suspended, the bill is passed, and without objection, the motion to reconsider is laid on the table.
For what purpose does the gentlewoman from Illinois seek recognition?
Mr. Speaker, I ask for unanimous consent that all members may have 5 legislative days within which to revise and extend the remarks on H.R. 839 and to insert extraneous material thereon.
Without objection, so ordered. Pursuant to House Resolution 170 and Rule 18, the Chair declares the House in the Committee of the Whole House on the State of the Union for consideration of H.R. 839. The Chair appoints the gentleman from Texas, Mr. Poe, to preside over the Committee of the Whole.
The House is in the Committee of the Whole House on the State of the Union for consideration of H.R. 839, which the clerk will report by title.
Union Calendar Number 15, H.R. 839, a bill to amend the Emergency Economic Stabilization Act of 2008 to terminate the authority of the Secretary of the Treasury to provide new assistance under the Home Affordable Modification Program while preserving assistance to homeowners who were already extended an offer to participate in the program either on a trial or permanent basis.
Pursuant to the rule, the bill is considered read the first time. The gentlewoman from Illinois, Ms. Biggert, and the gentleman from Massachusetts, Mr. Frank, each will control 30 minutes. The Chair recognizes the gentlewoman from Illinois.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I yield myself such time as I may consume.
The gentlewoman is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I rise in support of H.R. 839, the Home Affordable Modification Program, or HAMP Termination Act, and commend my colleague from North Carolina, Mr. McHenry, for introducing this bill. H.R. 839, the HAMP Termination Act, would put an end to the poster child for failed federal foreclosure programs. Announced by the administration in February 2009 and launched in March 2009, the program has languished for 2 years, hurt hundreds of thousands of homeowners, and must come to an end. According to the Congressional Budget Office, this bill would save $1.4 billion over 10 years. To date, the HAMP program has already consumed $840 million of the more than $30 billion of TARP funds that were set aside for the program. For this extraordinary investment, the administration predicted that 3 to 4 million homeowners would receive help. Sadly, for many American homeowners, the program has been a failure. In fact, HAMP has hurt more homeowners than it has helped. The program has completed about 540 mortgage modifications. Another 740,000 unlucky homeowners had the rug pulled out from under them. Their modifications were canceled. Even the Government Accountability Office, GAO, commented that borrowers have had their trial modifications canceled than have received permanent modifications. Earlier this month, on March 2nd, the Financial Services Subcommittee on Insurance, Housing, and Community Opportunity received testimony from the Special Inspector General for the Troubled Assets Relief Program, SIGTARP, Neil Barofsky. He exposed the most hazardous failing of the program, noting that, quote, there have been countless published reports on HAMP participants who end up worse off for having engaged in a futile attempt to obtain the sustainable relief that the program promised. Failed trial modifications often leave borrowers with more principal outstanding on their loans, less home equity, depleted savings, and worse credit scores, unquote. He continued by saying that, quote, worst of all, even in circumstances where they never missed a payment, they may face back payments, penalties, and even late fees that suddenly become due on their modified mortgages and that they are unable to pay, thus resulting in the very loss of their homes that HAMP was meant to prevent, unquote. Mr. Speaker, Mr. Chairman, many of our own constituents, like homeowners around the country, were lured into HAMP with the promise of relief. In the end, these misled homeowners ended up with no permanent modification, tens of thousands of dollars deeper in debt. One of my constituents reported that after many, many months under a trial modification, he was rejected from the program and immediately handed a bill for $42,000 in back payments, penalties, and late fees. How is that an effective foreclosure protection? HAMP has been plagued by problems from the start and is beyond mere reform. Numerous oversight bodies, including the GAO, have cited time and time again that Treasury has failed to respond to recommendations to increase transparency, accountability, and consistency of the program. Last year, the Congressional Oversight Panel, or COP, noted that because Treasury's authority to restructure HAMP ended on October 3, 2010, the program's prospects are unlikely to improve substantially in the future. COP also stated that billions of taxpayer dollars will have been spent to delay rather than prevent foreclosures. It is clear that the administration holds no intention of fixing the numerous problems in its flagship foreclosure program, a fact which has not gone unnoticed by the public. Americans for Tax Reform submitted testimony for our March 2nd hearing stating that HAMP has been the U.S. Treasury and Department of Housing and Urban Development's primary spending program for combating foreclosure and programs and has been a costly failure. Headlines around the country agree. A recent Washington Times article said that Obama's helping hand hoodwinks homeowners. Government mortgage assistance can be worse than nothing. A recent Wall Street Journal was entitled Housing Market Macrosism, the latest bad idea to raid banks and delay a home price recovery. We need to break down the barriers that have delayed the housing market recovery, including expensive and ineffective programs that have hurt so many homeowners. Unfortunately, programs like HAMP were set up in haste and have done little to restore stability in the market. We need to stop funding programs that don't work with money that we don't have. Out-of-control federal spending is hurting our economic recovery. Our nation faces a $14.2 trillion national debt, and economists agree that reducing government spending will create more favorable environment for private sector job growth. That's exactly what unemployed Americans and homeowners need, a job and a paycheck, not a handout or other failed taxpayer-funded government programs. I reserve the balance of my time.
The gentlewoman reserves the balance of her time. The gentleman from Massachusetts, Mr. Frank, is recognized.
I yield 3 minutes to a member of the committee, the former mayor of Somerville, Massachusetts, Mr. Capuano.
The gentleman is recognized for 3 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I thank the gentleman for yielding. Mr. Speaker, this is a program that I'm the first to admit has not lived up to what our hopes were. This program, we had hoped to help several million people. Thus far, we've only helped about 550,000 people. I fully admit that this program, like all the other foreclosure programs, could use a healthy dose of reconsideration and improvement, and I'm happy to work with that. But to simply repeal all of these programs is to walk away from individual homeowners, walk away from neighborhoods. In this particular case, last week, before the break, we walked away from neighborhoods. We walked away from cities and counties all across the country. In this case, we're walking away from homeowners. In this particular bill, as I said, this program, short of what we had hoped, it has still helped 550,000 homeowners to keep their homes. 550,000, with approximately another 150,000 on trial as we speak. 550,000 homes, just as a point of information, is more owner-occupied homes than exist in at least 17 different states. Wyoming, Alaska, Utah, Nevada, New Mexico, Nebraska, and on, all individually have fewer homes in the entire state than this program has helped. Yet we're going to walk away. Every single state in this nation has homeowners who have been helped. In Illinois, 29,000 homes have been saved. In North Carolina, 10,000 homes. In my own state, 12,000 homes and counting. Again, I'm not going to defend the specifics of every single aspect of this program that has been put together, and I am happy to work with anyone to make it better, to help more people, to keep their homes, keep their families together. But to simply walk away without offering an alternative means we don't care. This Congress doesn't care if you lose your home, period. Well, I understand that that's what some people want to say. They're entitled to do that. They're duly elected, have the power and the authority to do that. But I just can't imagine they could look at the individual constituents in their district and say to their face, we don't care. And if you feel that strongly about it, then you should not just repeal the program prospectively, you should repeal it retroactively. And tell the 550,000 people whose homes have been saved, we didn't mean it, it was a mistake, we didn't support it then, and as far as we're concerned, you can leave your home tomorrow. Now, I understand if that makes me a bleeding heart liberal, according to some people, so be it. Call me any name you want. But if you have the courage and the audacity to look at your own constituents and tell them, forget it, you don't care, I would encourage you to do so. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The gentleman from Massachusetts reserves. The gentlelady from Illinois is recognized.
I would yield 5 minutes to the gentleman from North Carolina, the sponsor of this bill, for 5 minutes.
The gentleman is recognized for 5 minutes.
I thank the chairman, and I thank you for yielding the time. The HAMP Termination Act, which is the legislation before us today, ends what I believe to be a failure of a government program. Not just a failure to help those 3 to 4 million homeowners that the Treasury originally set out to assist, and they've fallen well short of that. Just over 500,000 mortgage modifications have taken place in the 2 years it's been in existence. Not only has it been a failure in terms of the metrics they set up to achieve the goal, it's been a failure for the very people who enter into the program and yet are pushed out. Now, understand this government program. I want my colleagues to understand what this program does. The HAMP program, the Home Affordable Mortgage Program, brings folks in who are having trouble making their mortgage payments. They bring folks into and they will give them a verbal modification for their mortgage. And what has happened, and this is what my constituents tell me, this is what the hard facts and the data indicate as well, is that a majority of those folks that enter into this program are actively harmed by this federal program. Actively harmed. They're left materially worse off. And let me quote from the Special Inspector General for TARP, Mr. Neil Borofsky, who is a very independent-minded individual. He says, people who apply for modifications via HAMP sometimes end up unnecessarily depleting their dwindling savings in an ultimately futile effort to obtain the sustainable relief promised by the program guidelines. Others who have somehow found ways to continue to make their mortgage payments have been drawn into failed trial modifications that have left them with more principal outstanding on their loans, less home equity, or a position further underwater, and worse credit scores. Perhaps worst of all, even in circumstances where they never miss a payment, they may face back payments, penalties, and even late fees that suddenly become due on their modified mortgages that they are unable to pay, thus resulting in the further loss of their, the very loss of their home that HAMP is meant to prevent. Treasuries claim that every single person who participates in HAMP gets, quote, a significant benefit, end quote, is either hopelessly out of touch or a cynical attempt to define failure as success. Those are the words of the Special Inspector General designated to oversee this program and to give us and report to Congress and the public on the success or failures of federal programs and ways to fix them. Now, sadly, in the 2 years of this program and over a year and a half of criticism of this program, the Treasury has refused to fix it. My colleagues on the other side of the aisle have not offered legislation to fix it when they were in the majority. And so we're left with what is required today, is to root out this federal program that spends our taxpayer dollars yet hurts more people than it helps. One of my constituents from Hickory said, "We've been in the HAMP program since February of 2010 and still have no answer. We're being charged late fees, and we were reported to the Credit Bureau. We've been in underwater since April and on trial payments for 6 months, which was only supposed to only be 3 months. We've not yet received an answer." This is a federal program. If the private sector were to do that, we're doing this, there would be lawsuits. If the private sector were doing that, my friends on the other side of the of Congress in particular would be filing legislation to make sure they were unable to do that. Instead, my colleagues on the other side of the aisle in this administration are defending a failed program. And they refuse to reform it, they refuse to change it, they refuse to improve it, they refuse to do anything to it except defend it. And I believe, indeed, as the Special Inspector General said, it may be a cynical attempt to define failure as success. So I ask my colleagues to vote for this legislation and to remove this costly, ineffective, and painful government program. And I yield back.
The gentleman's time has expired. The gentlewoman from Illinois reserves. The gentleman from Massachusetts is recognized.
I yield 3 minutes to a member of the committee, the gentlewoman from New York, Ms. McCarthy.
The gentlewoman from New York is recognized for 3 minutes.
And I thank the ranking member, Barney Frank, for yielding me the time. Let me say something first. In the beginning of this program, we didn't have any service. That means there were no people out there to help those that were trying to apply. But we have seen encouraging signs in the economy, but we are still a long path towards economical recovery. Many of my constituents are still facing hardship, including trying to keep their homes. Well, the housing crisis hit, the private sector responded by turning their backs on those that needed the help. As a result, Congress stepped in and created housing programs to hold the industry accountable and to help these families weather the worst housing crisis that we have seen in generations. Now, thanks to the leadership of the President and the Democratic control of the 111th Congress, we are seeing more and more services adopting their own programs, largely based on the eligibility criteria within the programs such as HAMP. The past few weeks, my colleagues on the other side of the aisle have brought bills to the floor to terminate these programs, claiming they have done more harm than good to the homeowner, and that struggling homeowners are in better hands with the private companies that contributed to the housing crisis in the first place. Most of the homeowners got in trouble because the private sector is the one that got them in the problems. I disagree with that and point to constituents who have reached out to my office for help because their services were not being responsive. The bill before us totally terminates the HAMP program, however, protects assistance to the homeowners in a trial or a permanent modification. My amendment, which was not made in order, would have expanded that provision to include homeowners who on or before March 1st of this year submitted required paperwork for HAMP or had made a verified request to their servicer seeking that modification. My district office has heard from dozens and dozens of my constituents who have been waiting for up to 16 months for a response from their servicer regarding the eligibility for HAMP. They reach out to my office at the point of total frustration due to the lengthy response time when they have submitted the required paperwork. I shudder to think what the response rate would have been without this program in place. It's very disheartening that my colleagues on the other side of the aisle would like to shut down these distressed homeowners before they have even a chance to qualify for the assistance. The HAMP program was by no means perfect. Everybody agrees on that. Nor was it meant to be permanent. We all agree on that. Instead, it was meant to hold the mortgage service industry accountable and responsive to those that needed the assistance. At a time when our housing market is still very fragile and foreclosures continue to occur in record numbers, instead of terminating these programs, we should be trying to improve them. During the markup in committee, when we were trying to improve, and we asked our colleagues, all right, let's not terminate it. Let's try and fix some of the things that are not right. Supporting efforts to terminate these housing assistance programs.
I yield the gentleman 2 minutes.
Gentlewoman is recognized for an additional 1 minute.
Thank you, gentlemen. Supporting efforts to terminate these housing assistance programs means turning your back on your own constituents. Mr. Speaker, you know, we've had our disagreements. There's no two ways about it. But with that being said, to judge a program from the beginning, when we couldn't get services, now we are getting services. Now we are getting people to be responsive on getting people to stay in their homes. And think about it. All these homes that are being lost to families, where are they supposed to go? In New York, you can't find an apartment. So what are we doing? Making more people homeless? It was not the fault of the homeowners. I agree there were many people that shouldn't have probably bought a house for $700,000, $800,000. The majority of us here in Congress couldn't even afford something like that. They should have never been getting a mortgage. All of us, when we bought our homes, had to go through the third degree. How much money do you earn? Can you pay the insurance? Can you pay the taxes? That's why we also put legislation in there to have the services help them.
Time has expired.
With that, I yield back the balance of my business time.
Gentlewoman's time has expired. The gentleman from Massachusetts reserves. The gentlewoman from Illinois is recognized.
Mr. Chairman, if I might inquire how much time is remaining on both sides.
The gentlewoman from Illinois has 19.5 minutes. The gentleman from Massachusetts has 23 minutes.
With that, I would reserve the balance of my time.
The gentlewoman reserves. The gentleman from Massachusetts is recognized.
I yield to the gentleman from Delaware, 2 minutes.
The gentleman from Delaware is recognized for 2 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise today to oppose this ill-advised effort to repeal the Home Affordable Modification Program. Instead, we ought to be focusing on how we can move together, Democrats and Republicans, to address foreclosure crisis and keep families in their homes. Since the housing bubble burst, over 9 million Americans have gone into foreclosure. In my little state of Delaware, annual foreclosure filings nearly tripled over the past few years. And we aren't even one of the worst, hardest hit states. Now, one thing is clear. We can't help every one of these homeowners. Every situation is different, and frankly, not every homeowner can or should be helped. And most of the help should come from the banks and mortgage servicers. but they are not doing nearly enough in the state of Delaware. What is incredible to me is that with the HAMP Termination Act, my friends on the other side of the aisle have decided not to help at all. And that will mean a more direct path to foreclosure for thousands of families. The claim is that HAMP has hurt more people than it has helped. That is simply a ridiculous charge. Back in my home state of Delaware, the HAMP program has helped 1,600 homeowners, by far the most effective government program. That's 25% of the homeowners who filed for foreclosure last year. And I know a little bit about this. I served as the chair of the foreclosure task force when I was lieutenant governor for over the year. The best result we know is for the private banks, as I said, and the servicers to make the modifications necessary for the private sector to shoulder the bulk of the burden. But they're just not doing it. And so public officials need tools to help out, and HAMP is one of the best tools we have. The real question here is whether you believe there is an appropriate role for government at all to help homeowners facing foreclosure through no fault of their own. It's okay to use taxpayer funds to bail out the banks, but my friends on the other side don't want to use a small amount to help homeowners. Thank you. I yield back.
Massachusetts reserves. Gentlewoman from Illinois is recognized.
I yield myself 30 seconds. The gentleman from Delaware talks about his state. Let me just say that in Illinois, if we look back quarter by quarter, HAMP permanent modifications, for example, in second quarter of 2010 were 167,000, but the proprietary were 331,883. The next quarter, 97 HAMP and 346,910. I think that, and it goes on. And I think that's something to keep in mind, that the private sector can do it better. Of the 401...
Gentlewoman's time has expired.
I yield myself another 30 seconds.
Gentlewoman's recognized.
The private sector, out of 4.1 million modifications, was 3.5 million of those were private sector, and the rest of the 550. And that doesn't include the 750 modifications, that 750,000 modifications that were made by HAMP that were canceled. And with that, I would reserve the balance of my time.
Gentlewoman from Illinois reserves. The gentleman from Massachusetts is recognized.
I yield myself 90 seconds to say that that is an extraordinary bit of illogical you've just heard. The private sector, nothing in the existence of HAMP in any way retards people from going to the private sector. If you listen to the gentlewoman, you would get this fantasy picture that people were being restrained by the federal government not to go to the private sector, go to HAMP. In fact, HAMP is also the private sector. That's part of the problem. It is also a private sector decision with no coercion by the government. Some people wish there was more. But yes, it is true, the private sector has done the easy ones on its own. And anybody who wants to go to the private sector and get it does not have to go to HAMP. But there is no requirement that people go to HAMP, and this setup that it's a choice, you have to go to one or the other, people are free to go to the bank. If the bank won't do it, then they may go to HAMP. So this is an absolutely illogical notion that one blocks the other. The other point is that HAMP is the federal government bringing people into contact with the private sector. It is still ultimately a private sector decision. Part of the problem here is that it remains voluntary. I wish we had passed in this House bankruptcy. You know, you can go bankrupt for anything but your primary residence. And my Republican friends overwhelmingly blocked that from happening. And absent that, we don't have the leverage with the private sector we'd like to have. But it is in every case the private sector that decides. And if it is a relatively easy one to do, the private sector does it without any hindrance. If there is a problem, then you go into the HAMP. The other point is, and I've been waiting to hear, members have said more people are harmed than helped. That statistic appears nowhere in the record, and I wait to see it explained.
The gentleman continues to reserve. Gentlewoman from Illinois is recognized.
I reserve the balance of our time.
Gentlewoman reserves the balance of her time. The gentleman from Massachusetts is recognized.
Let me ask how much time has been consumed.
The gentleman from Massachusetts has 19.5 minutes remaining. The gentlewoman from Illinois has 18.5 minutes remaining.
Well, then I will defer to the gentleman from Illinois. We're about the same time. We've been going back and forth. I believe it's their turn substantively.
With that, I would yield 2 minutes to the gentleman from Pennsylvania, Mr. Fitzpatrick.
The gentleman from Pennsylvania is recognized for 2 minutes.
Mr. Chairman, I rise today in support of H.39, the Hemp Termination Act. I was sent to the nation's capital, like so many members of the 112th Congress, to do something about cutting back on wasteful Washington spending, to do something about the $14 trillion national debt. And in pursuing this goal, we made many difficult decisions about funding government programs. And at a time when families and businesses across Pennsylvania are being asked to do more with less, we cannot continue ineffective federal spending. Like so many programs hatched in Washington, HAMP has been one of those programs that, while well-intentioned, has grossly missed its mark. Established in 2009 to assist homeowners seeking to avoid foreclosure, of the $30 billion allocated to the program, only a fraction has been spent. And of the homeowners expected to be helped through the program, only an eighth have seen any permanent modification. Despite the fact that U.S. taxpayers have given lenders an average of $20,000 for each participating homeowner, there is nothing that prevents a lender from still foreclosing after the modification. That means that the bottom line of the HAMP program is this: false hope for homeowners who see the federal government send thousands to big lenders only to lose their homes a few months later. According to the Special Inspector General of TARP programs, there have been countless published reports of HAMP participants who end up worse off for having engaged in a futile attempt to obtain sustainable relief that the program promised. Failed trial modifications often leave borrowers with more principal outstanding on their loans, less home equity, depleted savings, and even worse credit scores, close quote. As we work to rein in government spending, to create certainty, confidence, and ultimately jobs, this program, well-intentioned as it is, has not been tax dollars well spent. I urge my colleagues to support the bill, and I yield back.
The gentleman yields back. The gentleman from Illinois reserves. The gentleman from Massachusetts is recognized.
I yield to another member of the committee, the gentleman from Indiana, Mr. Carson, 3 minutes.
The gentleman is recognized for 3 minutes.
Thank you, Ranking Member Frank. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Over the last few years, the United States has faced a devastating economic crisis. As a result of the economic downturn, many homeowners have lost their homes or are at imminent risk of foreclosure. That is why the Obama administration launched the Federal Home Affordable Modification Program to stem the escalating tide of home foreclosures and the disastrous impact it has on families and their communities. HAMP's purpose is to help eligible homeowners avoid foreclosure by providing them with permanent loan modifications to terms they can afford. Although this program is far from perfect, it has helped more than 600,000 families lower their mortgage payments and stay in their homes. H.R. 839, the HAMP Termination Act of 2011, will end this program and is the latest effort by House Republicans to end foreclosure avoidance and mitigation programs. With forecasts showing that there will be 3 million foreclosures nationwide this year and the housing turnaround not expected for at least 3 years, Republicans have yet to offer any alternative to help solving our housing crisis. Republicans have also failed to address the impact this crisis is having on minority communities. An estimated 17% of Latino families and 11% of African American families have lost their homes or are at an imminent risk of losing their homes. Eliminating support for distressed homeowners at this point in time would be disastrous for neighborhoods trying to recover from the foreclosure crisis. Instead, we should focus our efforts on ways to make HAMP a useful, wide-reaching program with meaningful goals. Goals such as pushing lenders to reduce the principal on loans that are underwater and give struggling homeowners real relief. I urge opposition to this misguided bill. Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I yield back my time.
The gentleman yields back. The gentleman from Massachusetts reserves. The gentlewoman from Illinois is recognized.
Okay. At this time, I would yield such time as you may consume to the chairman of the Financial Services, Mr. Backus.
The gentleman from Alabama is recognized for as much time as he wishes to consume.
I thank the chairman. Let's, as Republicans and Democrats, talk about what this bill does. This bill shuts down a federal program which spends money, and every dime of that money, the over $1,000 million has already been spent. $1,000 million. And they've authorized $29.9 billion more to be spent. Now, that's taxpayer money, and that's money that in 2008 we promised the American people when the banks paid it back that it would go in the Treasury. That was the promise that we made. So this bill keeps that promise, and that's that the money will be returned to the Treasury. Now, why do we make that promise, and why do we defend that promise today on the floor of the House? Because, ladies and gentlemen, we are spending our children and grandchildren into financial oblivion. We are threatening the national security of this country. Now, where do I get such a fact as that? Where do I say that it's a threat to national security, which I said last week and I was criticized? Well, let me quote Defense Secretary Robert Gates when he said 2 months ago, and I quote, "The country's dire physical situation and the threat it poses to American influence and credibility around the world will only get worse unless the U.S. government gets its finances in order." And I was told, well, that didn't say that it was a threat to our national security. But following that statement, Admiral Mike Mullen made this statement, the chairman of our Joint Chiefs of Staff: "The most significant threat to our national security is our debt." And in case you weren't listening, let me say that again. The most significant threat to our national security is our debt. Now, that wasn't a Republican on the floor of the House. That was the Joint Chiefs of Staff, Mike Mullen. We're spending $1.42 for every dollar we get. We're borrowing 42 cents of that. 12% of our debt is owed to the Chinese. Every day we write the Chinese a check for $120 million. They could buy the most advanced strike jet fighter in the world and still have $20 million to put in their pocket each day. In 1970, only 19% of our national debt was owed to other countries. Today, it approaches 50%. Now, let's not talk about whether we can afford this program. Let's talk about whether our children or grandchildren can. Because let's not kid ourselves. We can't pay it back. Now, do we want to spend $30 billion of our children and our grandchildren's money? Well, first of all, should we do that morally? But let's just assume that you say, yes, we should do this with our children and grandchildren's money. Well, who should we pay that money to? You talked about the banks. Well, where does this money go? It goes to the banks. Every dime of it is paid to a bank. You have a borrower, you have a lender. And with you, people loaned homeowners money they couldn't afford to pay back. And is that the taxpayers' fault? Should they pick up the bill? No. It's the banks, or it may be the homeowners. But the people that ought to pay it back are not the taxpayers. And if it can't be paid back, the banks ought to take the loss. but you talk about the homeowners, but it is the banks that will be paid. And you talk about 500,000 Americans that have been helped. You didn't mention almost 1 million that have been made worse off. Now, again, is that some mean Republican saying they're worse off? No. Today, March 29th, a letter from the largest national Hispanic civil rights and advocacy organization in the United States. You know who that is? It's La Raza. Now, what did they say? Let me quote what the largest, and I think we'd all agree, a very liberal organization, what did they say? I urge you to vote yes on this legislation, they said. Structural flaws, especially the voluntary nature of HAMP, has resulted in an abysmal performance by mortgage servicers and hundreds of thousands of families losing their homes to foreclosure unnecessarily. They say this program has resulted in hundreds of thousands of American homeowners losing their family. Now, are they the only people that have said this? No. Our own Inspector General, our own Neil Brovsky, SIGTARP, who was put in charge of monitoring this program, what did he say? Let me quote what he said. HAMP benefits only a small portion of distressed homeowners, offers others little more than false hope, and in certain cases causes more harm than good. And when did he say that? He said it this month before our committee. This month. How about the Congressional Oversight Panel, made up a majority of which are Democrats? What did they say? They said billions of taxpayer dollars, billions, will have been spent to delay rather than prevent foreclosures. Now, that's not Republicans who are getting some crazy idea that this program isn't working. No, it's Democrats. And who did President Obama, has he appointed to temporarily run the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau? Well, it's Elizabeth Warren. We all know the answer to that. Well, what does Elizabeth Warren say about this program? Well, let me quote what she said, just the facts, not Spencer Backus, not Patrick McHenry, not Judy Biggert. No, Elizabeth Warren, who works out of the White House, who's in charge of consumer protection. Because here's what she said, December 14th. Because Treasury's authority to restructure HAMP ended on October the 3rd, 2000, the program's prospects are unlikely to improve substantially in the future. In other words, they're not going to improve this program. So let's end by saying this. We say shut it down. You say mend. Let's mend this program. Why? Let's not pretend. We're not talking about mending. We're talking about pretending. The Treasury, according to Elizabeth Warren, doesn't even have the ability to do that. The administration itself, not someone here, but your administration, Laurie Mangino, Treasury official, said at the Mortgage Banking Conference February 24th, just a month ago, you won't see any major new programs coming out. We may tweak around the edges, but our primary objective in 2011 is excellence in the program we have. Well, there's been no excellence in the program. It's failed. The largest Hispanic group in America has said, end this program. But I tell you what, our grandchildren and children would say this, and you continue to say, and I agree with you, we've got 13 million American families underwater with their mortgages. And you want to pick and choose 500,000 of those to help. What about the other 21? Should the federal government pay everybody's mortgage that's behind? Why, 1 out of 4 American families are underwater on their home. You've got, it just came out yesterday, 13 million vacant houses in America, and almost immediately you come up with the Cash for Keys program, where you're going to buy these abandoned property. Why? From the banks, from the speculators. I don't think you've listened to the American people. I don't think you've heard what they said in November. This program has been criticized ever since its inception. You haven't mended it. You're talking about mending it today. Where is your bill to mend it? Is there a bill to amend it? Have you introduced it? Is there a bill?
Gentleman yield.
I will yield.
Finally,